4 years ago, I was perfectly healthy, doing lots of exercise like I do, doing my park runs. I'd done the weekend shift at BBC World News. The evening before, I'd been presenting till 10:30 in the evening, and I had a day off. I was feeling completely well. I had a bit of cystitis, which had been going on and off for, say, a week or so. And I hadn't got antibiotics for it because I thought it was going away. I'd had also a bit of an ache in my side, and in the past I've had a kidney infection, but it wasn't agonizing pain. I thought maybe it was because of my exercising. I might have pulled a muscle. It was just or me feeling stiff, which happens a lot. I've always got something that aches. So I was aware of it, and I thought if it comes back, I'll go to the doctor and get some antibiotics. I'd had fairly regular cystitis bouts on and off every few months or years for the last 20 years, 20 years. So I didn't think anything serious was wrong. Anyway, so by about lunchtime on that Monday, I started to feel, I'd never felt a chill in my body the hot, cold feeling like feverish flu. And I had my daughter, who was then 9, with me, and I said to her, look, I need to go and see the doctor. I think I've got flu, but I'm aware that I've had cystitis, so I need to be absolutely sure that they aren't connected and something hasn't gone serious in what I've got. So we went to she came to the GPs with me, and the GP looked at me and said that they thought I had flu, but they were going to give me some antibiotics anyway for the UTI, the bladder infection, or cystitis that I'd said that I had, although the urine sample didn't show anything wrong at all. By the time I'd even gone to get the prescription from the chemist, I could barely cross the road. It felt like my body was made of ice. The cold was so intense inside my legs. I almost felt like I was going to shatter if I bumped anything. It was just almost like a painful cold, but then alternating with ferocious heat. And I'd seen that I had a fever before I'd gone to the GP, and told her, and my temperature was really high. It was over 39 degrees. So got the antibiotics, went home. I remember my daughter trying to help me cross the road because everything felt overwhelming just crossing the road that afternoon. And I went to bed, and actually I took paracetamol. I was in bed. I was fine. I thought, I'm just going to sweat this out. I've got flu. The GP thinks I've got flu. It's just something about I need to rest. And what the weirdest thing was, I was sweating so much. I had grey bed sheets. If every time I got up out of the bed, there was an imprint of my body. I was sweating so much in bed, but I just wanted to sleep and rest and get over it. And I was communicating with my mum, and she was a bit worried, and I told her I had such a high temperature, and she may have heard or seen some of the publicity that there's been around sepsis, and something made her worry more than usual. She came over. She was about 45 minutes away from me, and I was saying, no, it's fine. I just need to sleep. I just need to sleep. Taking paracetamol, I feel much better. I'm fine now. I'm in bed. I could eat normally. I was hungry. I was eating and drinking normally, going to the toilet normally. Everything was normal. I wasn't slurring my speech. I was completely aware of what was going on around me. I just had this fever and like painful chills in my body. And I had a supermarket delivery coming that evening. My mum said, I really think you need to go and get checked out. And I said, oh, I can't. I've got my supermarket delivery arriving. Can we just wait? So that came at 6. We unloaded the groceries. I said, okay, I'll go if you can drive me there, but you don't need to stay. And my mum dropped me off at the Tunbridge Wells Hospital A&E, and I felt like such a time waster. I thought, I've just got flu. They're going to send me away. This was pre-COVID. This was 2019. So it wasn't as much a feeling as maybe you'd have now. But even then, it was, I'm a time waster. I shouldn't be clogging up the hospital. So I went to the triage. She dropped me off. I said, I'll be fine. But I did pack. For some reason, I packed an overnight bag. Something was telling me this might be serious. I'd never felt like this before. My temperature had gone up to 39.7, and I was taking paracetamol. So even then, the temperature was off the scale. And the triage nurse saw my temperature, and I told her, I've taken paracetamol and it's still this high. So she said, yeah, okay, sit and wait, someone will see you. And I sat for maybe 2 hours, and I was shivering. It was 25 degrees that day. It was a really warm summer evening. And I was shivering in A&E, and I asked a nurse for a blanket as she was coming past. And she got me a blanket, but I knew I started to really feel like something was seriously wrong at this point. And I was very pleased that I'd gone to A&E. My mum had been so insistent. And so eventually I got seen by a doctor who was taken to a side room. He came and eventually saw me properly after I waited a bit. And I'd had some blood tests, and he said that my blood culture showed that my body was really fighting something. All the markers were up, what they could see at that stage. And he said, I think you've got a serious bacterial infection. We're going to admit you, and I'm going to give you antibiotics of last resort. Now, I've never heard anything so frightening in my life. You know, up to that day, I'd been completely healthy. I'd never had anything. I'd never been seriously ill. And I sat in that side room. I had to wait quite a long time till I got seen again. And that was such a moment of reckoning. I was almost thinking, I will do anything to get through this, if I can just get through this. And I thought, how could I be? I was fine this morning. How could I now be on a drip with antibiotics, really, really strong antibiotics that a doctor's describing like this, and being admitted to hospital? And it was starting to get late in the evening. And I just remember being so scared. I could not believe it, that something so trivial, because clearly what I'd had, my bladder infection had gone through into my kidneys and somehow got into my bloodstream, had turned into blood poisoning, as he was calling it, or a serious bacterial infection in my blood. I just couldn't believe it. I thought, how it's almost ridiculous how something so small could have got me in this situation. So that night, I remember someone came to the door of the room with a wheelchair, put me in I was like, I don't need to walk. I don't need to sit in the wheelchair. I can walk. They said, just sit down. And I got wheeled along this corridor, and the doctor sort of said goodbye to me, the A&E doctor, and he said, you're going to the acute medical unit. And I just remember, I mean, my head was spinning by this point, and I felt really ill, but I felt a lot better because they'd given me a drip to rehydrate me, full of paracetamol, and I was starting to feel a little bit better. And I was thinking, no, I'm not ill. And then but then at the same time I was hearing what they were saying. I went to a ward, and they gave me a bed, and it was like I stayed awake all night because I was shivering so badly. I was so cold, and I was asking for blankets, and the nurses said, no, we can't give you blankets because your fever is sky high. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was lying still. My heart was racing like I was sprinting. It wasn't the fear. It was just, I couldn't get to sleep. And I said to a doctor, came at 2 in the morning, I said, what's going on? Why is my heart racing so fast? And he said, your body's in fight mode. It's fighting this, whatever you're fighting, whatever infection it is, whatever's wrong, because they didn't know for sure. They had to just guess based on what the blood results were at that point, the markers and the things they were seeing. And that was really scary, lying there, hearing my heart just thumping, doing nothing, just lying still, trying to sleep. And I couldn't sleep because I was scared, and this heartbeat was just insane. It was like 140 beats per minute, lying still. And then someone came to me, must have been in the early hours of the morning, and he said, your temperature's gone down a bit. We might be able to discharge you today. And I was like, yeah, it was all a false alarm. It was all fine. And I improved really quickly. The antibiotics worked immediately. I was having all sorts of different antibiotics. Some of them were oral, some of them were on a drip, IV antibiotics. But whatever I'd had, within 24 hours, I was responding really quickly. And they were able to discharge me. And then they had an ambulatory care system where I could go home and come back in and get my antibiotics, which continued through the week. And subsequent doctors said, it must have just been a virus that you were fighting. We don't know what it is, but maybe a virus just got hold of you, a flu-like virus, because you responded really quickly. So eventually by the Thursday, I'd gone in on the Monday and I'd been back and forward to the hospital, which is quite close to my home. They said, well, we think you're better. We'll discharge you completely. And by Thursday evening, I was home and better again. On the Friday morning, I got an urgent call from the hospital saying your blood culture results have just come through, which take 3 days to grow in the lab, showing exactly what infection or whatever you had. And they said you need to come back in immediately. They said you have the blood cultures detected you had gram-negative bacteria in your bloodstream, which was E. coli. And that's why I was so ill. That had gone through from my kidneys into my bloodstream and was the start of sepsis. And I went back in and I dropped myself back in. That's how well I was by this point. I was just taking antibiotics now and again just to finish the courses. And they checked me out and they said, no, you're out of it. It was the first morning I'd woken up and I didn't have a fever. It was wonderful. I woke up and I wasn't completely soaked in sweat. And temperature was back down to normal levels, and yet they were really worried about what they'd seen in the results. But it was just it was a kind of snapshot of how ill I was on that Monday, and I'd in the subsequent 3 days I'd got rid of it. I'd fought the infection with the help of those extraordinary antibiotics they gave me, and it just, I was so lucky that my mum had sounded the alarm and said, you go now, because I would have happily slept till the following morning. And those extra, say, 12 hours, they could have made all the difference, because the sepsis that I had was caught in time before it started to do terrible and life-changing things to my body. We really got there, with a whisker, because what they'd seen in the results from the blood, they were really worried by. But thankfully, that very first doctor treated it as a serious bacterial infection and got me those massively strong, effective antibiotics as soon as, more or less, within 2 hours of me being admitted. So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for all the things that went right about that situation, because it could have turned out so unbelievably differently. Maybe there are misconceptions that it's young children and older people who are most prone to it. But I was a healthy 45-year-old doing park runs, running lots of kilometers every week, running around after children, doing a high pressure job. And something as trivial as a UTI or cystitis got me into that situation, because it just got hold of me, turned into a kidney infection, which I didn't even know was there, because I hadn't had that treated in time. And it's just astonishing. And that's what really shocked me that night in hospital, thinking, this is ridiculous. Your life could end or be changed forever by something you hadn't even really noticed. It's not dramatic or headline grabbing. It's just something that trivial. It can be that trivial. And that was so shocking, thinking, how could it possibly turn like this? And I do think, and this is why I go on about it, particularly every anniversary, because I remember that date so well, the 16th of July, because that week was it was life-changing for me, in the sense that for the first time I was really scared for my health, was seriously ill. And to hear words like antibiotics of last resort from a doctor, I just couldn't believe it. Didn't feel like they were talking about me. So yes, I had that misconception, that sepsis happened to other people, or vulnerable, clinically vulnerable people, or the young or the old. But no, it happened to me. I was extremely healthy, and perhaps that's why I bounced back quickly with the combination of being healthy and the rapid treatment. But yeah, there still are misconceptions. I think it is changing, and I will do my best to keep talking about it, so that anybody of any age, no matter how healthy they are, thinks perhaps, get something seen to and make a noise about it. Right, I have this terrible feeling something wasn't quite right. And if you get that feeling, just make a noise about it. Who cares if you are bothering someone or making a fuss or wasting someone's time? It's better to waste someone's time than end up, with how it could end up if you're not seen in time and treated properly. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't just go with it and give into it for a while. My I felt guilty about being off work. I felt like I was, again, this sort of, I don't know, so many of us have this feeling I need to get back as soon as possible and just get on with it. And I was presenting it was a very exhausting evening news program that summer. It was called Outside Source, and it involved being on your feet for 2 or 3 hours in front of a touch screen, live TV, interview after interview. And I wanted to get back to it because I felt bad about being off. So I think it must have been about a week or two later. I said, no, I can go back. And I did one shift, and I needed about 5 espresso to get through it. And I managed it, I survived, but I just said after that, I'm just not up to it. I was exhausted. I was completely wiped out from the sepsis, even though it was only the early stages. I had clearly had my body had had a huge, huge shock. And I think I went back very part-time for the following few weeks until I eventually thought, just go with it and take the time you need. And I think I went back maybe 1 or 2 days before I felt ready for a few weeks after that summer. And then after a few months, the tiredness went away. But also I think I had a month or so after that, went on holiday, and I remember being exhausted, even like by the afternoon, just needing to go to sleep. I needed to rest so much more on holiday, and my children being quite demanding, wanted to go everywhere. I remember them saying, can we walk to the beach? And I just like, I cannot even face that. I've walked to the beach in the morning. I just need to sleep in the afternoon. And that was unlike me. I had a lot of exhaustion afterwards for about 2 to 3 months after that. Do you know what? They were fantastic. And I think when people realized how ill I'd been, they couldn't have been better. My line manager, who managed my rota, was so sympathetic. She saw that I wanted to come back, and then how I tried. And then, yeah, absolutely, the BBC were brilliant and understood. And also, being on air, you can't really go on air if you're not feeling like up to it. There's nowhere to hide. So being that exhausted, and I had no stamina for a good couple of months. They were great, and they adjusted my work to cope with that. But the thing is, it doesn't really, you don't look ill. You just, it's strange, because what was making you ill has gone, but the after effects it's just tiredness. But I think now in after the pandemic and how people have dealt with long COVID and things like that, it's just there's much more awareness of long-term effects of an infection or an illness that may not be visible.